So you bring up the question, how do you work on non-attachment related to certain people? And the idea, I suppose, deals with work and toxic relationships. Well, this all comes down to, in a way, the principle of harmlessness. Harmlessness, because you have to practice harmlessness to yourself. Speaking to this is a little more difficult for me because the majority of my life, pain was something that was a great motivator. I mean, if I saw something that was painful and I could prevent it, I'd do whatever it takes to prevent it. And so when it came to dealing with people, it was not that hard for me mostly to avoid toxic relationships as far as I could, because when I would come at things in life, my question would always be, all right, is this supportive to well-being and peace and contentment, or is it not? And if it was supportive, I had no problem keeping it there. But if it wasn't, I'd find a way to get out of it, because there's an image in Vasista's yoga where the story starts out. It's about a person who has, I think, 1,000 arms and legs, and in each of the hands he's got like a club or a whip, and all of those thousands of hands are just beating himself constantly. And he doesn't know that he's the one beating himself. He's the one hurting himself. And the description in that, the description in there was to kind of illustrate the point that we torture ourselves like this. We are holding the mace, we are holding the whips, we are holding the clubs, and we are beating ourselves with it. So the best way to move beyond toxic relationships is just to ask yourself, is it all right to be kind to myself? Is it all right to decide that I don't want to pollute my body or my mind like this anymore? I mean, if someone kept giving you glasses of water with formaldehyde in it or some toxic chemical, would you keep drinking it just to be nice to them? That's sort of how toxic relationships work. They keep giving you something, but it's always laced with a poison. So if someone came to me and they kept giving me drinks with formaldehyde, and I'd say, look, just get out of my life. If you're going to keep trying to poison me, move on. This is the best way I know how to approach toxic relationships, because you can't reason with them. You can't usually, I've never experienced anyone in a toxic relationship where I could say, you know what, your behavior is kind of contributing to this, because they don't have any conscious awareness of it. They might not even know that they're being toxic, because they themselves are caught up in pretty profound conditioning. And usually it relates to how they've been raised, what they think is right, their own sense of warped obligation to probably their own friends and family. So you can't reason with, usually you can't do that with people in toxic relationships. As Mr. Davis would say, if a relationship is not supportive of you, you either remove yourself from the situation, or if you can't remove yourself from the situation, you do your best to be internally centered every time you have to interact with them. And if that requires that you have to state your boundaries over and over and over again and not get pulled into it, that's exactly what you have to do. So as far as attachment goes to people and loved ones, it just takes time and also effort and self-respect, as well as respect for other people too. So you don't go around actively hurting others, but standing up for yourself, having good boundaries to keep your life healthy and strong. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And in time, the stronger you get, the easier it is to let go of attachments. Because most of the time when we have attachment to other people, it's because we think that they can provide something for us that we don't have within ourselves. Some kind of love, some kind of care, some kind of strength, some kind of sense of safety. And ultimately, it'd be wonderful if all the members of humanity could work together to support each other in those things like love, health, safety. but it's kind of rare. And if you find one or two people, those are the people you pay attention to. Otherwise, it's learning to develop that sense of strength, love, safety, even trust in a higher power as well. And that can help break those attachments to toxic or difficult relationships. I'm never going to tell you that that's easy, especially if you are already conditioned to be susceptible to toxic relationships. You got to work through that condition. And that is not easy, because that's just like getting stronger. You have to feel that you are strong enough that you won't even tolerate that. Early in my life, I did have, from a teenager through probably halfway through college, I did have numerous toxic relationships. I didn't know any better. But the more I started to see what was going on there, I just cleaned out those relationships. And yes, I was somewhat alone for a few years, other than with my wife, and maybe one or two friends. But as time went on, I have all kinds of friends now, and they're all loving, supportive. We get along well. We understand each other. I feel quite blessed and quite connected to numerous people. And again, I've tried to instill that in the daughter of my my partner now, because she didn't have very good role models. And I explained to her one day, I said, look, I am the way I am. I have strong boundaries and there's nothing wrong with that. And I said, and do you think I've got friends? Because she sees the people that come over, that I play music with, that we go hiking with, that I visit with. She sees that they're good, wholesome people. And so I made that specific point so she could see that it is perfectly all right to be strong within oneself, and that you will eventually attract those people that are non-toxic and are supportive of you. So we have another comment here about contemplate non-attachment, and that it seems hard to accept non-attachment to things, life, and addiction to life. It's hard, but it's helping me to let go. Yes, it is not easy. And that is one of my frustrations with individuals who teach yoga or try to teach yoga, and how they always focus on the easily marketable stuff. And they really leave out the hard work that is required to get the full benefit or results of the practice. So these things that we're discussing, no way should you ever think that they're easy. Maybe you have some kind of psychological or neurological issue that it's okay for you to let go of things. It doesn't bother you one way or the other. And that's great. But for the majority of humanity who's trying and has an interest in yoga practice, you're learning to grow up. You're learning to grow up. It's like you've become an adult, and no one ever taught you how to set up a bank account or pay your bills or keep the oil changed in your car or manage a house. And all of a sudden, bam, you recognize there's all this responsibility I have. Well, yeah, it's going to be very anxiety producing for a while until you get the hang of it. And then paying your bills, being responsible, eating right, exercising, it just becomes second nature. All right, so now another comment. I'm still trying to let go of things during my meditation, but it seems like my mind is so engrossed that I'm only able to get very few minutes to actually work the meditation part, and the rest of it is fighting off thoughts. Yep, that's how it goes. You just keep doing it until you get stronger and stronger, and then your ability to fight off thoughts, in a sense, becomes greater than the thoughts. Think about someone in a war situation. Enemy after enemy is coming their way. That person has to keep just fighting that enemy until eventually either they're dead or all of the enemies have fallen. And again, I've never been in a war situation. This is just my imagination. But if you're in a situation where you're fighting for your land, for your home, and people are invading, well, yes, waves come and you take care of them, and then there'll be moments of peace and stillness where you can rest. But then you still have to be vigilant and know that it may happen again. And so you keep going until it becomes less and less and less and less, until the fight no longer has to be there. I would love to tell you that no fight is involved in this work. But there is a reason that the Bhagavad Gita starts out with the sense of a war, because that's what it's like in the beginning. So as long as you keep doing it, wonderful, just keep going. And one of the things that can be helpful for the meditation technique side of it is to be more engaged in the meditation technique. Meaning, really, if you're doing mantra meditation, don't just sit there and think, oh, I'm going to be peaceful and oh, peace. Oh, it's wonderful, just beautiful. Maybe that works for you, and some people it might. But you might have to get in there and say, all right, I'm distracted. There's all these things that my personality keeps telling me are so important. So I'm going to get in there and I'm going to Om. And in my mind, I want to hear it loud, louder than anything else. And then when I exhale peace, I'm going to do my best to bring up that sense of peace and to feel it like you're trying to break through something. And you do that more and more and more, and then you're really getting into the practice, and you become like those spiritual giants or those spiritual warriors that people, those terms that they use to describe Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar. You got to get in there, and you have to do it, and it's like a sense of breaking through something. In the same way that when you start to learn that you're in a dream and you learn how to get in and out of those dreams, sometimes you might realize that you're in a dream and you can't just wake up. You have to really concentrate your attention at the spiritual eye and say, wake up, and mean it and feel it, as though, if you imagine someone trying to harm your most precious loved one, and you're trying to grab them and say, stop, knock it off. That same kind of force is required from time to time internally to make this work. And what happens is, imagine dealing with a bully. If that bully is running over you and you're just letting it happen, well, the bully is going to keep going. But if you stand up to that bully and you say, quit, well, sure, they might punch you in the face and knock you out, and that's no good. But you get back up and you say, no, I mean it, quit. And they might hit you again. If you keep getting back up and you keep resisting and saying, get out of here. Bullies are just like the mind. They like easy targets. And the more you stand up and the stronger you are, eventually you become not a tasty target for the bully. The same thing will be true with the mind. The mind, those distractions have to realize you mean business. And eventually they part. They go away, and you are strong at that point. And then all you have to do is say, get out of here. Because a strong person, when they have, in a sense, asserted their strength, remember, these are just analogies and metaphors, but when they have asserted their strength and they walk into a room and someone's coming at them, all they got to do is look at them and say, no. And then that person leaves. No fights necessary. You have to do this with your mind as well as the people in your life too, every now and then, depending on just how dangerous or difficult they might be. But you have to do this with your mind. And the more you do this, there will come a time when you don't need to fight off thoughts, because thoughts are like the bully and they just don't want to mess with you anymore. For example, I have to be in a really terribly stressful situation before I can't fight off thoughts. And even then, most of the time, it's not even an issue. I just know they're not important, go with them. That comes with practice. That comes with experience. So you develop that, and that's what you're doing. You're 2 years into the Kriya Yoga apprenticeship program. Just keep going. Okay, and yes, I see a comment. Yes, force can be used. You have to. I mean, just like you need to force your body to get out of bed, or you need to force yourself to go lift some weights, or you need to force yourself to go run. That's just part of it. But eventually it becomes natural. And internally, your mind is like a bully or a child. And sometimes you have to be consistent and stern. That doesn't mean that you are vengeful and maniacally aggressive. It's stern. It is consistent. It is standing up It is continuing to stand up and letting that internal dialogue know we're not doing this right now. And you'll find this is why, and this is a beautiful segue here, this is why one of the things that Mr. Davis would talk about over and over again, which so few teachers do, is that really part of this path is mastering your states of consciousness. Mastering your states of consciousness. Now imagine if you have done this inner work to where you are no longer bullied around by your thoughts. You're no longer bullied around by your emotions, by your psychological quirks and complexes. Now something happens in your life that's overwhelming, maybe something that causes extreme emotion. But in that moment, if you got emotional, things would just get worse. Now you have the strength internally to recognize, yep, this is a bad experience. I'm probably going to scream or cry about this in a few days' time. But right now, I've got to keep it together so that things don't get worse. And so when you have that kind of capacity, then while you're in your life, you are a master of your states of consciousness. Again, I was talking to one of the Kriya apprentices, and we were talking about meditation experiences. And he said, you know what? He said, one of the most important things I've learned from all this, he said, if a particular situation was going on in his life, if this had happened years ago, I would have made it worse. I just would have lost it, and I would have, as if to spite myself, made it worse. He says, but what this has taught me, aside from the ability to go within and meditate well, is I'm not making things worse anymore. I might want to. I might still have the urge to do those reactions that I had before, but now I have the ability to, at least somewhat, regulate and master my states of consciousness. And that doesn't just include thoughts, that's also emotions. That's also emotions. Yes, we don't want to repress emotions. Let it flow through. It is no problem being sad. There's no problem being anxious. There's no problem being fearful from time to time. It happens because of our hormones, because of just the weather, because someone looks at you wrong, whatever. But you just let it go. Again, from my own life experience, having talked about being influenced by anxiety and depression when I was younger, well, it still comes through, maybe not for the same reason. Sometimes I look around the world and I think, wow, what a depressing place, when I'm not enamored with nature or playing music or meditating. Sometimes things happen that you think, this is terrible. And what I have found is that I don't have to pay any attention to it when I'm doing my work, because I've mastered my state of consciousness to just push it out. But there will be other times when I'm not working, when I think to myself, you know what, I'm just going to feel it. I'm just going to be present, and I'm just going to feel it. I'm going to admit that this is not nice right now, that this is overwhelming, that humanity is the way they are, or that life goes this way. And what I found is that by doing that, it doesn't last as long. Whereas before, when I was younger, it might have, depression or anxiety could have lasted weeks, months. Now, if it comes through and I just lay down and say, yeah, I don't like it, I give up. I'm not really giving up, but you understand. And I'll just lay in bed, and I'll even go to bed a couple hours early and think I'm just not even going to do anything else. And what I'll find is an hour after laying around, I just feel okay again, because I honored it. I just let it pass through. So we need to do whatever it takes to master our states of consciousness. But then once we are able to master our states of consciousness, doing whatever it takes, we then become better able to dance with those states of consciousness. Meaning that if it's Sunday evening and there's nothing else to do, you've mowed the grass, you've visited your parents, you've scooped the cat poop, and you're sad for a little bit, it's all right. You've exercised this weekend, you've taken care of your body, just go be sad for an hour or so. If it persists, well, that's a problem. Then you might need to work with someone, or then you might need to use your willpower and say, all right, this is enough. And that is perfectly okay to do too. My own experiences with grief, I still had to live, I still had to teach, I still had to do my work. And so I would let myself grieve, but then at a point in time I would say, I got to stop right now, because there are other things that need to be attended to. And I do believe that it was my training in Kriya yoga and meditation practice, because it was about 18 years of that before I fully experienced grief, that allowed me to navigate those things. So you got to keep it. This is what makes it so hard, is that you're alive, you're dancing, you're growing, you're changing. As we talked about in the beginning, there's not going to be a formula that says grieve this long, power through this long. You've got to dance with it. And it all comes down to being appropriate to the moment. And you learn to be appropriate to the moment by learning to calm your mind and your awareness, go within, sit within the silence, and then you can reflect and contemplate, well, how do I respond now? And then you follow that truth or that inspiration that arises. And sometimes that truth or inspiration might say, all right, now's the time to kick some ass, to say, I'm not giving into this right now because I got shit to do. Other times it might be, you've taken care of yourself pretty well this week. Take an hour, mope. But you see, it's all about being appropriate to the moment and not thinking that there's one pattern or one formula that you're going to lock into. You've got to be appropriate to the moment.